folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I'm not going to waste it. Let's get right to the interview. Hey, folks, this is Tim. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. If you listen to classic rock, well, you should, because it's classic and it rocks, like the old saying goes. But we have got a guest today that is an expert in all things classic rock. He's an expert in Chiefs football. He's got a podcast. He's got a web show. He is the director of content and programming for 104.7 The Cave in Springfield, Missouri. The man's got a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm glad to have him here. Mike, how you doing?
Doing wonderful, man. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast, sir.
You bet. This is exciting. I listen to your show pretty regularly. As far as classic country, the only thing I listen to is classic rock, so I'm very familiar with 104.7 The Cave.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much, sir.
Yeah. So let's get back to the very beginning of Mike and tell us your childhood story, where you were born, siblings, family, all that good stuff.
All right. Oh, man. Okay. So I was born in Joplin, Missouri. My dad, I can't remember who he was working for at the time, but I know he was in sales. He quickly then got a job offer for IBM, and we lived in Las Vegas from like 83 to 86, 87.
Okay.
Then moved back to the area. I lived in Columbia for a little bit, and then I grew up in Cape Girardeau from about, I lived here in Springfield part of my kindergarten and part of my first grade year, then moved to Cape, then lived there from first grade through my freshman year of high school. I moved back here my sophomore year and finished out high school at Kickapoo, and then I enrolled in OTC and did the OTC. It was SMS, then changed to MSU. I was there and graduated from Missouri State. Pretty typical American family. Both, my parents worked. My dad coached everything we ever did: basketball, football, of course, baseball. Played sports through high school, and then about sophomore year when I moved here, I kind of had to make a choice between, do I dive into music or keep doing sports? And I was, already pretty deep in drums and then guitar at that point, so I leaned more to music. I marched drumline in high school as well. I was in jazz band, orchestra. I actually went to state twice for jazz band and guitar and drums. And then after I obviously I was in bands and stuff. And then when I went to enroll, I originally was going to be I wanted to be a teacher. And then when I went to school, or went to enroll, they told me that if I wanted to go the music ed program, that I had to march another 2 years in college. I was like, I'm not doing that. There's no way. So I walked out and went into the media production building and found out about the I think my major was audio production, which was a comprehensive major, so I didn't necessarily need a minor. I wish, had I known more, then I would have probably done the non-comp and got a marketing minor, but I've spent, almost 20 years in this business now, so I've pretty much got a pretty good education on how to market
Right.
by now. But originally, I was going to graduate. I wanted to go do internships in Austin and Nashville in music studios. What I wanted to do was be a producer. I think, like, as a musician, I love playing in bands, but I think producers are probably one of the best jobs in the world, because you get to, your band comes in, you get to hear them, you get to say, okay, this is what I would do. This is how I would mold that. And some of my favorite bands have some of the best producers of all time. We could get into that. But then my senior year, found out I was going to be a father. So things changed. I kind of pivoted. I got a job with KSPR, which had just been bought by KY3, worked in TV with them for a little bit. And then I needed an internship to graduate college, even though I was working for a TV company. They said I still needed an internship somewhere. So I said, okay, that's great. So I ended up getting an internship with John Kimmons here at 104.7 The Cave the summer of, what was it, 05 or 06. Worked that summer. Then when it was over, he hired me to do imaging and any kind of board op fill-in stuff for on air. Started doing that, kind of did both TV and radio for a while, and then kind of had to make a choice. Eventually, the morning show guy quit. And then there was a director opportunity for TV. So I kind of had to decide. And I felt, after being with both, this would be probably the best place for me, just because I knew I could be in a little bit more control over my destiny. And then also TV, at least in that company, it wasn't really a great environment. and there was a lot of turnover. And where I could see Midwest Family was they kind of believe in their people. They let them be who they were and like develop them.
Hmm.
So I had the hindsight to stay, and yeah, that was it. So I'm here now, what, 17 years later, 16, 17 years, or no, God, it's almost, no, it's 19 years. Oh my God. 19 years later, I'm now the director of content and programming for the entire group. So I'm over all 4 or 5 properties that we have, which includes a digital imprint around the Ozarks. So I essentially now started as the intern, and now I'm the boss of all things programming and content related for this company.
It's kind of unique how your Mike the Intern name has stuck, and that's what everybody knows you by, even though you've been an intern for what, 18, 19 years?
That's the thing about branding, man. And I'm never going to change it. Like it'll be, even if I am, if they ever, for whatever, God help them, if they do make me a general manager, I'll still go by that name. And again, like I don't, as far as my managing beliefs, like, you know, I'm not a micromanager, and I, I give a little bit of grace to people so that they can learn, because that was what was given to me.
Yeah.
I lead from the front. I've done everything that this company can do, so nothing is below me. If that includes setting up a tent, taking it down, going to things for free, walking the room, meeting people, all that stuff, nothing is below me. Like I started that way, and that's the way I continue to do business. So
Hmm.
anyone that works for me understands that if
Yeah.
it's not below me, it's not below you. And again, there's a level of complacency I think that happens when you get up higher and higher and delegate, but you start to lose sight of the way things are. And so that's also a part of why I feel like I've been able to do what I've been able to do, is because I stay in the thick of it. It's hard to do sometimes,
Yeah.
especially like right now we're in the middle of season, got postseason, it's crazy, but like I try to keep my hand in everything just so I can kind of have an eye on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I heard a phrase a long time ago, and I can't give credit to whoever came up with it, but it was, if serving others is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. And that's,
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to. And most of the time, most leaders don't really want. It's not. It was never like I was very clear with everyone as I moved up. Like if I had my choice, I would just continue to run one station and be the morning show host of it, and that's it. My life would be so much less complicated. I
mhm.
wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like if
Yeah,
that was all that I did, I would be happy with it, and I would have no problem with it. Like that's awesome. Let's just keep it rolling and do it. But
right.
so most leaders, they don't, it's just because of circumstance that they have to step up and do it. And those are usually the best ones, at least.
Right. Your love of music, you were talking earlier about how you were in band and you played a couple of different instruments, and that's obviously been something that's been a part of your life since the very early days. You still play guitar and drums pretty regularly, or is
Oh
that
yeah,
taking
yeah,
a
yeah.
backseat? Or yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a hip hop Beastie Boys tribute called the Grasshopper Unit, which is kind of a
Right.
fun deal we do. It's I also DJ for that, but then I'm also in a band called Grok with a bunch of guys. It was in a band called Muzzle with, and that's all original. And we basically meet once a week. We've only played a handful of shows just because I was pretty clear in the beginning that I wasn't looking to go out and play a bunch of shows with this. I just wanted to play with my friends. But yeah, I
Sure.
play all the time. Yeah, I can't go without listening to or creating music. Like it's my outlet, so I have to do it in some shape or form.
So you're on a station that plays classic rock, but you, as you just stated, you're into hip hop. You pretty much, it sounds like you like every kind of music. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me, like, what's my desert island genre, I would tell
Yeah.
you without hesitation it would be soul music.
Okay.
Um, my favorite artist of all time is Stevie Wonder.
All
I
right on.
think I think if you believe in God or whatever faith that you do believe in, if
Mm,
there is a higher power, I believe that there are certain individuals that God speaks through. Stevie Wonder is one of them. I
yeah.
mean, there is no way that a blind kid from Michigan that literally has like no chance at all is discovered in his teens, was able to start making records at 13, and then literally in the 70s, every year he put an album out that he pretty much played everything on and wrote everything for and sang everything on, was a Grammy winner. And
Yeah.
so I again, like soul music encompasses so much. Like you could say Stevie Wonder, you could say Al Green, you could say Sam Cooke, you could say James Brown. I mean, so in itself, it's a large spectrum. But yeah, soul is definitely my favorite. I'm a big fan of jazz. Obviously, I was in jazz band. I'm more. I wouldn't say that I lean into the. There's certain bop stuff I do like, but I mean, if like my favorite composer, probably jazz related, would either be it'd probably be Wayne Shorter. Probably favorite sax player too. I always lean to Coltrane. I'm a big Coltrane fan.
Sure.
Bill Evans. I mean, you can kind of get lost in the weeds. I also the way my music tastes kind of go with the seasons too. Like obviously I have a Spotify account, so I have like massive playlists on there,
Yeah.
ones for each season. So like, you know, as you said in the beginning, I know a little bit about a lot.
Right.
So not a lot about a little. So uh, I'm obsessed with it. I'm constantly consuming it wherever I can find it. New music, old music, bands I'd never heard of. You know, once you get to that point where you understand the language of music and how it's created, then you really start to kind of dig into where these guys got their inspiration from. Who was that guy? You know, like with jazz music, you can say, "Oh, who's this? What's this album?" And then you look at the credits, and you're like, "Oh, okay." McCoy Tyner played piano on this. Oh man, they got Elvin James on this too. You know, there's so many different times where, especially in the jazz world, where other players played with each other, and a lot in the soul world too, depending on where the album was made. So that's kind of in my mid to late teens where I really started to dig into some of the bands that I was like, oh, you're just a version of this, and this is, way better
Right.
and whatever.
I'm like you in that I like a lot of different kinds of music, and I do find that if I'm going to listen to jazz, it's almost always going to be slow, smooth, chill jazz, and it's going to be in the fall and the wintertime. It seems like whenever my wood stove is going, I want to listen to some slow jazz or some smooth stuff. I can't explain why that is, but they seem to marry together pretty well.
Yeah, 110%. And again, you know, it it is that way. Obviously in the hall we just got done with the holidays, so like
Yeah.
jazz is synonymous with Christmas and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But it just depends. I feel like I've been in this season of like soul jazz for a little bit longer because back in the day I would hit like this this area where I just kind of crave something heavy, like
Yeah.
I need something real big. And so I'd listen to just big heavy stuff. I'd listen to Sleep and Home and all these bands that I love and Sabbath or whatever. And then you get kind of, okay, I don't need so much heavy anymore, I need this.
Right.
it just I, it, I almost equate it to when you walk into a record store and you have no idea what you're looking for, and you see a record and you're like, oh, cool. And then you look at that, and then that leads you to another one, and then that leads you to another one, and you kind of just fall
Sure.
down that rabbit hole.
You just mentioned something there, and I'm curious what your take is on this records. I'm 50 years old. So when I was growing up, we moved through to CDs, and then we got to everything was on an iPod and your iPhone, and Spotify, and everything is digital now. But records have made a comeback in recent years. What, if you had to guess, what's the reason why records are becoming so popular again?
Well, I started collecting when I was about, I want to say it was my 12th birthday, was when my Uncle Bob gave me like the last remaining version of his record collection, which had Moon Dance by Van Morrison, Absolutely Live by The Doors, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young so far.
Nice.
There's a few others in there too. Harvest by Neil Young. So
Hmm.
like some really good records straight out of the gate. And at the same time, my grandfather had an old Bose system, like the touch ones, that
Hmm.
lit up.
Hmm.
And I rocked that thing for years until it finally quit on me. But yeah, I got in really early, and nobody was collecting records at all. I could go into a thrift store and usually find like 5 to 10 albums I didn't have at a great price. And then that's where I started building my collection. Obviously, now through what I do, some people, I trade and I buy, but I'm at about 3,000 in my collection now.
Wow.
And that includes everything you can think of, from rock to jazz to soul, 45s, LPs, all that stuff. And so I got lucky because I got in it before everyone else started doing it. And now it's awesome to see it. Like I one of my favorite things to do is to go down to like stick it in your ear on record store day and just hang out with those guys behind the counter and just watch what people pick up. I think
Mhm.
it's such a cool thing and it sparks conversation, it sparks connection. So that's part of it. I think kids are discovering that it's better to own something than as opposed to just having a digital version of whatever it is wherever it is. I mean there's validity in that, and there's it's a lot more convenient to have that,
Yeah.
but there's something to be said about the art of going into your room, picking a record out, opening it up, putting it on the turntable, hearing it. I want to be like it's got to be the sonic quality. The kids, they understand. I don't think that's it, because you're seeing all these not to knock the Crosley Suitcase record player, but you see a lot of kids with those to start out with,
Yeah.
and they're garbage. It's like you're not going to get any kind of sonic benefit out of listening to it on those speakers. But if you spend $700 to $1,000 on a pretty good system and speakers, then you can really hear the sonic quality and the openness of what vinyl can bring. But
Mm.
I don't think, like, as far as the majority of kids that are buying records, I don't think that's why they're doing it. I think it's just the tangibility of it.
Yeah, tangibility, that's the right word. It's got that vintage vibe to it
You
that,
got it in your hand. Yeah. I mean, it's,
yeah.
it's, you hold on to it. And I'm glad. I love it because had it not been for the resurgence of this of vinyl, there are so many records that once I got to a point, you got your Dark Side, you got your Led Zeppelin fours and all that
Mhm.
stuff. You start going after your white wells and presses the on one-time presses and stuff. And I mean, there are records that I have in my collection alone that are almost hell. I've got a signed Dark Side of the Moon. I don't even know what the value of it is, just because you can't find it. But and I'll never sell it. But like, just it really blows my mind that you can go on to a record thing like Discogs and you know you'll see just records that go for an exuberant amount of money that are just like insane on how
Yeah.
much they're worth. I've got, for example, a jazz record by a Japanese trumpet player that came out in 2014. And they only did one pressing of it. It sold for $900.
Good grief.
That's a double album that I paid $40 for.
Man.
With Gauntlet has sold for $900. And it blows my again. It's crazy. I had a buddy that picked up a Japanese OG press of Dark Side of the Moon when he was there. He just happened to come across it. That's a $700 record.
Wow.
I mean, and so, but again, I would never. That it's like whenever you're a kid and you're collecting, cards and stuff, and you're like, oh my god, I got to keep
Mhm.
your favorite picture. Oh, this is great, And then my dad goes, well, yeah, that's great. They say that's what it's worth, but it's not worth that until you get someone to pay for it.
Right.
So it's nice again that I can look at the value. I didn't get into collecting records because of what I could sell them for. I got it because I wanted them and I want to listen to them, and I do.
Right. So let's go back to your education, your career training. If someone came up to you and said, "Hey, I would like to follow in your footsteps. I want to be on-air talent, or I want to, get into mixing, or I want to," what kind of advice would you give someone? Is it better to go get formal training at a university or a college, or is it better to try and get an internship somewhere, or is it better to, with YouTube and stuff nowadays, you can learn so much just from your recliner at home on an iPad or on a laptop. But what would you advise someone if they were wanting to follow in your footsteps?
I mean, so it's kind of a double edged sword. I mean, on the one hand, you just said it, anyone can do this, right? You can buy a mic for $200, plug it into your computer, and boom, you can start a podcast. You can
Right.
start a blog. You can start a web series. Like, technology has made it so easy for anyone and everyone to be involved in this in any
Hmm.
facet they want to be, which is great. It's oversaturated, and I think eventually the world is going to hit a wall, especially with the introduction of AI. And now you're like looking at your social feed, going, "Is that even real? Is that
Yeah.
chick real? Is that
Right.
video real? Does that make, you know what I mean?" So
Hmm.
there's like this. which is also going to play into our favor, especially being very local direct is how we operate these stations and what we do. We're like your hometown brewery. That's what we want. When you're gone, we want you to remember. It's like when you're in Kansas City, you always are like, oh man, want to win the Fox, or you're in St. Louis, it's KC95, right?
Mhm.
That's what we want when you come here. We want that to be synonymous with this area. So you kill the it's I don't know it. So anyway, anyone can do it. So my first thing is start doing it. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I started recording 4 tracks in my bedroom when I was 14 on a Tascam cassette recorder. So that's where I started. Well before I was involved in university, learning Pro Tools, learning how to run a board,
Mhm.
mixing, all that stuff. I just started doing it. So that's a big thing. And you can literally, there are kids that do stuff all the time that get huge just because it just picks up. And that's just the way it is.
Right.
Um, as far as education, I mean, the one thing I will say that, college is what it is. I think it's way too expensive.
Yeah.
I feel horrible for the kids that are actually trying to like pay for college and trying to get into this right now. Like you're talking about 5 6 figure debt as soon as you graduate. That's just horrific at
Yeah.
24 25 years old. But I will say that the connections that you make in school are invaluable because, for example, you are trying to get in with we can't technically bring in an intern unless it's for school. So, like for example, if you're like, "Hey, I want to be an intern with you," it have to be for college credit or high school or whatever, legally. So that would be your only step in, at least in our company, would to be going to college or high school, and they say, "Hey, can you intern here for the summer or for the fall or whatever?" And we do it all good.
Okay.
But so that in itself is a big deal, I think, the connections that you can get. But again, it's kind of one of those things where, you know, you should just start doing it. I
Yeah.
think you can find out, you can learn stuff, you can pay to go and have access to studios and learn mixing stuff, but there's just so much online now that you can literally figure it out on your own. And most kids are willing to do that. So why not?
Sure. Your advice about just do it is one of the things that got me motivated to do this podcast is I have an hour commute to work, and so I listen to a podcast or I listen to a YouTube video. And as I was looking into the podcasting thing, there was a constant theme of all these internet gurus that would, try and give you advice on equipment and all that kind of stuff. They would say you just have to start. You have to understand you're not going to be able to get better and get a catalog and learn how to interview, learn all the fine tuning stuff until you start doing it. You have to understand your first few episodes probably aren't going to be very good and you just got to go. And I thought, well, all right, I'm just going to do it. So I did. But
And it's awesome. And again, that's kind of one of the things that it got me this job is I just started doing it.
yeah,
Never had any drive to be a DJ. Never thought I'd be, running a just I just started doing it and then got better as I went. Obviously, I had a skill set that got me in the door, but there were other parts of the things that I do every day that I had no clue about that I'm do every day now. So
yeah,
school and education is great. I'm not really sure. I know that when I was in school, their idea of broadcast media, more specifically radio, was heavily nonprofit driven. So, like, their idea of what radio actually was very in line with an NPR station or whatever. And that's just not reality.
yeah,
That's kind of my biggest hang up with the college education system is you get a bunch of these people that had been involved in media and then either for whatever reason didn't continue or took a teaching job and they're completely out of it for years. They have no idea what it's like right now in the real world. Does that
yeah.
make sense? Like you
Oh,
don't.
yeah,
And I would be in class learning from a teacher, that was working for NPR while I'm already working for a station, just shaking my head going, you absolutely have no clue. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So it's just one of those things where I don't know. I don't want to just say, hey, it's a waste of money, but at the same time, you kind of got to look and see what it is for what it is. Does that
sure.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah. What, I don't think I told you this before when we were talking, but when I first started college, I thought I wanted to get into communications in some form or another. And I did campus radio for like a year and a half. And I realized I really wasn't very good at it, but back then I was splicing tape for commercials and putting carts and I can imagine now that that seems just archaic compared to what you do in your studio now. You've been in this line of work for a long time. What technologically have you seen that's been the big changes over your career?
I mean, I never got when I came in, we still had, CD deck. Actually, at my first probably year or two of air checks are on cassette. That's how we recorded.
Okay.
But now everything's digital. Our board that we run in our studio, the one I'm talking on right now, is all digital. Every channel has its own dedicated IP address. So you could literally dial up any audio source from any part in the entire building and set it up in your board, which is pretty cool. And again, it's just continuing on learning that skill set. Obviously, when I got in, we didn't have a Facebook page. I don't even think Facebook really. I mean, it kind of existed, but not like it does now.
Right.
And I was one of the first to say, "Hey, we should probably set this up." And so, and social media, and so now we're more than a radio company. We're a media company. So, we can do audio production, podcasting, commercial stuff like that, but we can also do video production. We can do video commercials. We can do any kind of video editing that you need, full episodes, whatever. We have the capability. So that's part of what continuing on with that skill set and your learning, I guess, is that you just continuing adding to the things that you can do. You know what I mean?
Right.
We don't stop it. We do nothing but audio. It's literally everything and anything that you can think of. We can cut you a TV commercial that'll play on a streaming service if you want to.
Hmm.
We do SEO, we do website development, we do all of it.
Man. The social media stuff when I was younger, that was just on the fringes and it was kind of there, but it wasn't really a thing. But now, I mean, people major in marketing, social media. That's all that they do. It's such a huge part of business anymore. So,
It is, and again, it's you can't lose sight of what you are, which again is a radio station, but
yeah.
then you always want your net to cast out as far as you can to bring everyone back to what it is you do.
Hmm.
So if you're a big Chiefs fan and you're a female in your early 20s, you might not care about ACDC, but you love the Chiefs. So we bring you in that way, right?
Right.
Or if you are a huge Raiders fan, but you love Led Zeppelin, we'll pull you in that way. Or if you're a big supporter of the veterans, we do a lot of stuff with veterans. We pull you. So it's just trying to find other ways to bring people into what we do.
Your veteran comment right there. Is it Lunch with a Hero? Is that what it's called?
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Can you tell the listeners, just if they're not familiar with that, what that is?
Yeah, I would say about 7, 8 years ago, I was in a board meeting and we were really heavy into. We did veteran stuff, but we leaned a lot more to motorcycle stuff, and kind of were looking at it and going, well, what else can we do? My best friend currently serves with the United States Navy. He's a pilot in Hawaii. My stepfather retired from the Army after his 8-year Marine and then 16 in the Army. He still works for Department of Defense as a civilian. My mother retired at Fort Carson. My grandfather fought in Korea. My aunt and uncle both served in Vietnam. So I never served myself, but it's obvious because I knew exactly what I wanted to do from
Hmm.
a very early age. So I was in a position where I didn't have to, and I knew I could do what I needed to do. But veterans have always been a big part of my life. And so there are a lot of really good veteran organizations across the country. I mean, so many that do incredible things, too many to name. And so it wasn't about what I believed wasn't about like trying to raise money or help anyone. It was more about just raising awareness for the fact that these guys are your mechanic, or maybe your doctor, or maybe the guy who picks up your mail every day, or whatever. They're in
Right.
all walks of life, and it's not just about Veterans Day. We should be thanking these guys and gals for their service 365. It's not about politics. It's not about anything else other than the fact that these young men and women signed their name on a dotted line, willing to give their life for their country, regardless of what the world looked like at that time.
Hmm.
And so after all these years, had figured out that, one of the biggest parts and the things that I loved about this job was the human connection that I can make with people. And so that in itself is a big reason why I do it, because every other week I take a veteran out to lunch. He or she tells me their life story. I'm not Geraldo. I'm not trying to, it's just tell me what you did. What do you do? And that's invaluable to me. The relationships I've created and the people that have let me in on their life, it's a big part of what I do.
Yeah. I think that's great. I've got nothing. I work with a lot of guys that are still in the military or that, former military of all the branches before they got in the fire service. And I've got nothing but respect for anybody who does time in the military like that. They're the reason why we have a country, if you want to get,
Yeah.
specific about it. What do you like most about your job? If somebody just came out and asked you that real simple, straightforward question, what would be the top one or two things that you would list?
First one, obviously, what I just mentioned, the human connection.
Yeah.
That is the biggest part of what I do to me. And like I've been very clear with my superior that, if you guys get to a point where you feel like I can't do a managing job and continue to do this show and do what I love to do, I'll walk away and just do what I do, because that's what is important to me.
Yeah.
I'd say the second thing is probably the work life balance that it allows me to have, the freedom. Obviously I'm responsible for this thing being on air. So if it's Sunday night at 6 o'clock when everyone's chilling and I get a call that we're off or something's wrong, I got to deal with it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's 365, and it's been that way for my entire time here. So, but with that, it also allows me to have more freedom. If I want to go to my kids, cookies with Santa, I can get out of here and go do that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
If I want to go see my kid perform in a speech and debate tournament, I can go do that. I don't have to worry about. They're really good with that stuff, and so that's a huge part to me, because again, your job, no matter what it is, even with a cool job like I have, your time on this planet is limited. The amount of money you can make is not. So that trade off for your time for money is something that you really have to consider when you are, doing or figuring out what it is you love. Because there are guys that are making, 500K a year that hate their life and hate their job, but they got
Yeah.
money. And
Right.
what's important, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, my bills are paid. Am I going to have a brand new 2025 truck? No,
Yeah.
but I got a truck that runs. It's a
Sure.
93 Ford Ranger, and it's paid off and it works. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I'm happy. So I'm lucky that I found that. I found that out too. That lesson, I learned that lesson early enough. The third one, just being involved in, that was the biggest thing that I was looking for after I graduated, was the ability to continue to be involved in music, whatever that was. And I am. So yeah, I guess those are the three.
Right on. Did you have any mentors early in your career that when you were getting started that kind of took you under their wing and said, "Hey, I see something in Mike. I'm gonna kind of guide him and see if we
You
can make
know,
some success out
yeah,
of you."
I was really lucky. Obviously, my old boss, John Kimmons, was really good at helping me understand certain facets of this, and what in his drive and dedication to the product was something that I will never forget. The woman that trained me on my first day, she goes by Laura Jacobs. She's a dear friend of mine. Taught me a lot. I also learned a lot from early on. We all, as a company, hired a guy named Tommy Kramer, who's out of Shreveport, and he very much like a he is very much like a uh, vocal coach, talent coach. He looks like George Carlin and acts like him too. And within like a month, everyone here were like, "Oh my god, he's so mean! He's just so mean!" And I mean, his air checks were horrific. You were
Yeah.
going there knowing that he was just going to rip you apart, and he did. But he also taught me how to talk. He taught me how to conversate. Um, he taught me how. There's so many things that I learned from him that are invaluable. And again, the on the job training is huge. I used to PA for the Springfield Cardinals. Did that for like 8 seasons,
Yeah.
and that was really good on the job training, because you literally get a sheet of copy in front of you the first time you see it. It's 4 or 5 pages long, and you've got to read it, no mistakes, in front of thousands of people, and you're the only thing out there. And when you're reading some of those names from lineups and other stuff, dude, like, you got to get it right. You know what
Oh,
I mean? So it's just like one of those things where you get you gotta take what's given and try to make the best of it and learn from it. And so
Right.
yeah, I would say John, Laura, and Tommy were big. And then you know, I every chance I could get an opportunity to learn something else, whether that be the way we engineer stuff or sales, I took it.
Right on.
Oh,
That right
that
there
right there
parlays pretty
plays
well.
pretty well.
What soft skills do you think would benefit the type of person that would be successful in your line of work or in media? What are they? You talked about the ability to kind of think on your feet and adapt when you're given something and you can't make any mistakes, accepting criticism that sometimes can come across as kind of harsh. What are the other things, the intangibles that you see people that come in and they go, I think they've got something.
Can you say bad words on your podcast?
I try not to. Some kids are listening, but
Okay, so the biggest thing is care. I would say GAF if I could say it, but
right.
care about what you're doing. I
Yeah.
think that's a huge thing that you see this complacency in the kids that are coming up where there's just like, you used to be able to be like, oh, this guy's not going to do anything because he's afraid he can't pay his rent. But then inevitably they just don't care. So that in itself is a big deal. Having the wherewithal to go figure out the answer yourself before you come to me, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is like, do you not know there's a Google that exists? And like there are certain so many times where you're like, wait a minute, did you actually exhaust all of the things that you know to do before you came to me? And if
Yeah.
the question is yes, no, dude, that's crazy. Yeah, I've never seen that before. Oh yeah, that happened to me once. Yeah, this is the way, or what, this is how I handled it. This might be different, but whatever. But like if it's, you see these guys that post on Reddit, it's like, what's this guitar? And it's a Les Paul. And, it's like, dude, do you not know that there's a search engine out there called Google that literally can answer any and every question that you have? It might not be the right answer, but at least it points you in the right direction. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Hmm.
it blows my mind that that's the biggest thing is people that have the drive to show up and care and also to try and solve them and problem solving whatever that looks like on their own. That's a huge deal for me. Anything else can be taught. Everything can be taught, but the
Right.
drive and that, yeah, the willingness to show up, that cannot be taught. That's either in you or not.
I had a captain in the fire service pretty early on that told me one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is do your best to bring me solutions to the problem that you're bringing me. And it's kind of like, well, I may not be able to find all the answers, and I may go and Google or look or ask and try and figure it out. Sometimes I have to come to somebody and say, I've looked around and I just can't figure out what the answer is. I think you're going to have a more receptive audience when you approach it from that place.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just like I said. I I've had plenty of interns in my life that have worked for me that I can usually tell within a day or two what kind of person I have.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And then I'm usually right. Some people get better, but most of the time I can usually tell like this is going to work or this isn't going to work.
sure. What's your best advice for someone that when they make a mistake? Because we're all human, we all make mistakes. It's bound to happen. You want to limit it as much as possible, but when you do make a mistake, how can they best handle it?
Own it, obviously.
Yeah,
Don't pass the buck. Don't make excuses. Like I don't know how many times I've had to say this to my staff, which is like I probably made three mistakes so far today. Right. I've been on the air since 5. I've only been at work for 4 hours. I've at least made at least one mistake. And I'm
right.
the boss. So if that's the way it is, everyone's gonna do it. So it's not about blame. It's how we fix it and go forward. Now, if you continue to make the same mistake over and over again, then we have a problem. But
Yeah,
everyone's going to make a mistake. We're human beings. We're not computers. We're not infallible.
right.
So you have to be able to make if you make a mistake, learn from it, own it, correct it, and move on. So many times people get involved in the blame, and it's never about blame because again, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to scream at you like I'm your dad? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sit you down. I'm going to say, this is where we went wrong and this is what we need to do. Blame doesn't do anything. Excuses don't do anything. It's just
Yeah,
you move on. So, yeah, the ownership and accountability is a big thing for me too.
sure. If you weren't in your current career, if you could go back, and I know we can't live in the past, of course, but if you went back and you had it to do all over again, Is there another career on the side? And I think I already kind of know the answer to this, but is there another career that you thought, I really wish I could have done that?
No, honestly, my man, like I said, the only thing that I would change that I would have got a minor in marketing, but that didn't really change anything because I ended up getting it. So I just don't have the degree to prove it, but
Right.
I definitely have the time. No, I'm exactly where I want to be
Right on.
in my personal and professional life. Obviously it hasn't been easy. There have been mountains to climb. There have been roadblocks. There have been all kinds of stuff that life brings you. But at the
Sure.
end of the day, I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Right on. Man, if you're happy, that's worth a lot of money.
Oh, yeah,
So
I told you, man. I feel like I said, I figured out early on that the balance between life and your work and all that stuff and your family is valuable, very valuable. And if you can figure that out and make it work, you'll be a very happy person.
one final question. What is something that you've accomplished either in your personal life or your professional life that it always pops up to the top when someone says, "What are you most proud of in your life?"
My kids. I
Yeah,
mean, I got one that's going to start college in the fall. I got one that's going to start school, the real school in the fall. So one in, one out at the same time.
right on.
I'm above the moon proud of both of them. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better kids. Like those dudes are just awesome. They're very cool kids, and I hope the best. That's my biggest accomplishment.
Are they following in dad's footsteps going into media in some
Uh,
form?
I don't know. Well, the youngest one may. He's already a ham, just like I was. The oldest one is a little bit more inner interviewed and kind of looking inside. It's one of those things where I he's saying he's looking to be a teacher when he goes in there. We'll see, but I mean, as long as he figures out what it is he wants to do in life, I'll support him no matter what.
Right on. Where can they find you if people want to know anything about Mike the Intern? Obviously, 104.7 The Cave, Springfield, Missouri. Where else can they find you?
1047thecave.com is our website. We got a jock pages on there. I've got all the social media handles. I'm on YouTube. You just Mike the Intern. Pretty much any social page you follow, if you type in Mike the Intern, you'll find me.
Right on. Mike, thanks for your time today, buddy. It was awesome talking with you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on your podcast, my man.
You bet. Take care.
You too.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully, you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.